It all started after my daughter Brittany's piano recital when she was 5 years old. "I hate you, Mom. You're the worst." "Brittany, what's wrong all of a sudden?" I was completely taken aback by Brittany's sudden change in attitude, especially after she had been in such a good mood earlier. When I asked her, she complained about her dress, which was second-hand, and how her hair had been styled. It's true, compared to the other participants, her outfit wasn't exactly glamorous or stylish, but I had done my best with what little we had at the time, putting it all together on a shoestring budget. I apologized to her over and over again, but nothing I said seemed to lift her mood. Then my husband Brandon chimed in. "Hey, it's because Mom is always trying to save money." He took Brittany's side, joining in on blaming me. For the next 9 years, I endured daily insults from both of them. There were times when she would say things like, "I wanted fish for dinner," and she would throw out the meal I had made right in front of me. Other times, Brandon would criticize my cleaning or laundry, saying it was sloppier than usual, and I wasn't allowed to go to bed until I fixed it. Brittany, on the other hand, would lash out, furious because I forgot to bring something she needed, making her embarrassed at school. She constantly demanded clothes and accessories that stood out more than everyone else's, which made our financial situation even harder. Still, I put up with it, thinking I was doing it for the sake of my family's happiness. But that illusion shattered completely one day. I can't build a warm, loving home anymore. I had finally come to that realization and told the two of them I wanted a divorce. To be honest, a small part of me hoped, at least at the end, that they might try to stop me from leaving. But their responses were, "Get out of here already, you useless woman. Wait, where's our thank you for everything?" The cruel words were more than I could handle, and I found myself speechless. "Thank you, really? I'll never forget what you've done." What? Suddenly, we all heard a voice from behind us, and everyone turned in shock. The voice belonged to someone I cared about deeply. "My name is Allison. My simple, uneventful life took a dramatic turn when I was 42 years old. But before I get into that, I want to tell you a little about my past. I've always had a timid personality. It's something I've been aware of for as long as I can remember. Even in elementary school, when people asked me to do their homework or help the teacher, I couldn't bring myself to say no. The reason was simple. I was afraid that if I refused, they wouldn't like me anymore. As I grew older, I learned that in a healthy relationship, these kinds of things wouldn't cause tension. Yet I was never able to fully change my nature, and I remain as timid as ever. Looking back, the fact that I didn't get into any major trouble during my school years is entirely thanks to my family, especially my older sister Hannah, who is 2 years my senior and always looked out for me. Hannah and I are polar opposites. She's always been the type to stand her ground and voice her opinions clearly. I absolutely adored Hannah and looked up to her in every way. But Hannah would often say, "I'm too harsh. I don't have any warmth. I don't even like myself." In response, "Well, if we were half of each other, we'd probably be just right. But honestly, I'm glad I'm your little sister. Your strong sense of justice will definitely help someone someday," I would tell her. She always had a slightly shy expression on her face, and she would quietly say, "Thank you." As we grew older, Hannah and I began to pursue different paths, and the opportunities to see each other gradually diminished. Still, we kept in touch frequently, and from time to time, we would meet for a meal together. Even as adults, Hannah's caring nature remained unchanged, and whenever we met, she would always ask, "Has anything changed?" Each time, I would smile and reply, Nothing has changed. We were that close, but as I entered college, we slowly grew apart. The reason was Brandon. I met him in college. After sitting next to each other a few times, he started to talk to me. Hey, we sat next to each other the other day too, right? Would you mind telling me your name? It's Allison. Allison, that's a beautiful name. I'm Brandon. Nice to meet you. Yes, nice to meet you too. His first impression was that he was a friendly, charming guy. And even though I was introverted and quiet, he was always the one who approached me. Allison, how about grabbing lunch after this? I could use your help with that assignment we had. Sure, if I can be of help. Every time we met, Brandon would invite me to lunch. Then, during our second year of college, I've liked you since the first time we met, Allison. So would you go out with me? His confession came out of nowhere. But by then, I had started to have feelings for him too. So I immediately said yes. Once we became a couple, Brandon would take the lead, planning our dates and trips. So we're meeting at 5 p.m. at the cafe for your birthday. But I have my part-time job that day. What? It's our first birthday together since we started dating. You can ask someone to cover for you, right? I've worked hard to make this day special. Oh, really? Okay, I'll try to talk to my manager, but I can't promise anything. Thanks. He could be a bit pushy at times, but I found his assertiveness reassuring, as if he was guiding me. However, the more time I spent with him, the less time I had for my parents and Hannah, especially Hannah, who had moved out after starting college. We kept in touch, but we rarely saw each other anymore. During my fourth year of college, I had received early job offers from 2 companies. However, I was having trouble making a decision. It was then that Brandon said, definitely go with Company B. Company A is a big corporation, right? Someone like you, Allison, wouldn't last in a place like that. Company B is the only choice. Encouraged by Brandon, I chose Company B. To be honest, deep down, I was more attracted to Company A. But I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe I wasn't cut out for it. Perhaps Brandon sensed my hesitation and was trying to give me a push. In the spring of my 5th year as a working adult, Allison, I want you to marry me. What? I've realized something since I started working. I need you, Allison. I don't want you just coming over to my apartment on the weekends. I want to be with you all the time. So will you marry me? Brandon, I'm so happy. Yes, I would love to spend the rest of my life with you. I accepted Brandon's proposal, and we happily got married. At that time, I was living at my parents' home. Brandon was living in the same apartment he had rented since his college days. Actually, ever since I graduated, Brandon had brought up the idea of living together multiple times, but my family, especially Hannah, was strongly against it. The reason was simple. If I commuted to work from Brandon's apartment, my travel time would double. If you're going to waste time commuting, you'd be better off working overtime, or find a place to live somewhere halfway between your jobs. Those are your 2 choices. After listening to Hannah's advice, I realized she was right. So I decided I would either turn down the idea of living together or suggest moving somewhere else. Besides, I thought that if we had enough trust between us, something like this wouldn't ruin our relationship. But in reality, Brandon kept pushing the idea. If I love Allison this much, doesn't she feel the same? Why is Hannah's opinion more important than mine? He would say things like that, sounding almost jealous. So I suggested moving to a new place, but Brandon shot it down right away, saying he was too busy with his new job training and business dinners. He kept telling me how much he loved me and how he wanted to be with me all the time. That's why he seemed upset that I wasn't more enthusiastic about living together. Honestly, there were moments when I thought maybe we should just live together after all. But then Hannah's words stuck with me. If refusing to live together makes him want to break up, he wasn't the one for you anyway. Besides, you already decided you didn't want to, didn't you? Thanks to her, I didn't have to suppress my feelings back then. The compromise we reached was that we would live together only on weekends. Even though Brandon had been living on his own for years, he wasn't good at cooking or laundry, so I would often bring homemade food or take his laundry back home to wash for him. Brandon was always really grateful and would give me massages or treat me to a nice meal in return. And when it was time for me to leave, he'd always say he didn't want me to go and get all clingy. I found that side of Brandon to be so endearing. So when he proposed, I was beyond happy, like I was walking on air. We'd been together for so long that I thought nothing but a smooth, happy life awaited us. But by the 3rd year of our marriage, after I became pregnant with Brittany, Brandon completely changed. Now that we're having a baby, obviously you'll have to quit your job. Who's going to take care of Brittany and do the housework if you go back to work? Well, we could split the work between us. Oh, so you're just trying to dump all the housework and childcare on me so you can take it easy. I'm not like you, Allison. My company actually expects things from me. If you've got a problem, you can talk once you're earning as much as I do. The company I worked for, Company B, had a great work-life balance and offered generous leave policies. The salary wasn't as high as Brandon's, but the work environment was excellent, with great colleagues and supportive supervisors. That's why I wanted to continue working after the baby was born. And I told Brandon that, but he didn't understand. In fact, while I was still in the hospital after giving birth, Brandon called my company and told them I was quitting. I couldn't suppress my shock and confusion at Brandon's outrageous behavior. So as soon as I got out of the hospital, I confronted him. Why did you do something like that without even asking me? I hadn't decided to quit my job yet, but Brandon, as if he had done it for my sake, replied bluntly, "Why?" "Because there's no way Allison can juggle both raising a kid and working at the same time. You're not exactly the type you could tell your boss, 'I quit,' either, are you? So I went ahead and did it for you." In a way, his opinion wasn't entirely wrong. Even before I got pregnant with Brittany, I had struggled to balance work and taking care of the house. But still, shouldn't we discuss these things and respect each other's opinions? We're a couple, after all. Come on, marriage means we're family, right? Why would you need to tiptoe around family? Plus, we're about to be parents, aren't we? The most important thing is to think about Brittany's happiness. That's why I made the best decision for both you and Brittany. You get that, don't you? Although there were parts of Brandon's explanation that didn't sit well with me, I couldn't argue back when he mentioned my own shortcomings and brought up our unborn daughter, Brittany. In the end, I chose the path he wanted, becoming a housewife. Of course, right after giving birth, I still felt attached to my job, but that feeling gradually faded as I became consumed by the day-to-day tasks of caring for our home and Brittany. Looking back, I realize now that being able to watch Brittany grow up was one of the happiest times of my life. My mom wasn't a housewife either. She worked while raising me and my sister. She would often say, "I'm sorry I made you and Hannah sacrifice so much when you were little." Of course, neither of us ever felt that weight toward her, but over time, I began to understand her sentiment, the desire to be there and watch her children grow up. Time spent with your young child passes in the blink of an eye, and it's incredibly precious. I came to understand this firsthand. I'll never forget the day Brittany rolled over for the first time, the moment she stood up, or the very first word she spoke, and seeing her smile as she clung to me, or watching her fall asleep after a long day of playing. Those moments filled me with an indescribable sense of love. But that happiness didn't last as long as I hoped. It was the year Brittany started preschool. Hey, how long are you planning to laze around at home? Get out there and find a job already. Brandon suddenly changed his tune and started insisting that I go back to work. There were several reasons for this shift, but the main one was that we were considering buying a new house. With the mortgage payments looming, he couldn't manage the finances alone, so he needed me to go back to work. I found a job that fit his expectations, but soon enough, it became impossible to juggle both work and household responsibilities. So I once again approached Brandon, asking if we could share the load of housework and raising Brittany. But his answer was a firm no. Housework and raising Brittany, that's your job, isn't it? I'll help with preschool events, but everything else, you handle it. You're Brittany's mom, after all. That's true, but you're her dad. Couldn't you help out just a little more? Look, I already said I'm going to attend the event, didn't I? I'm even taking time off from work for Brittany's sake. So what else do you want? You really need to start acting like a proper mom. I had so many things I wanted to say back, but I couldn't muster the courage. Brandon worked hard for the family. He even took time off work for us. He was planning for the future of our family, even thinking about buying a house. I felt like wanting anything more would be selfish, so I ended up saying nothing. True to his word, he rarely missed any preschool events for Brittany. The other parents and teachers always praised him, calling him a wonderful dad, which always put him in a good mood. At these events, he treated me kindly, acting like we were the perfect couple. But the moment we got home, why is dinner takeout? You're wasting money again. I'm sorry, I was busy with the preparations for the preschool Christmas party today. Well, you could have prepared earlier. You've known about this for a while. You're such a useless person. It was like dealing with a completely different person. This cycle kept repeating. And what hurt even more was that, over time, Brittany had started to mirror his behavior. The first time I noticed it was after Brittany's first piano recital when she was 5. At the recital, she was all smiles, showing affection towards me. But as soon as we got home, her face clouded over. Why wasn't my dress cute at all? And my hair wasn't nice either. Brittany, what's going on all of a sudden? My friends looked like princesses, so why was I the only one who didn't? It's so unfair. I hate you, Mom. The dress she wore that day had been a second-hand one from a friend's daughter. I had styled her hair myself too. Apparently, she wasn't happy with it. It's Mom's fault. Don't worry, Brittany. Dad will buy you whatever you want next time. So cheer up, okay? Really? Dad, I love you. It was Brandon who had originally suggested the second-hand dress. I've told you before, my paycheck goes into our retirement savings. I don't have extra money to spend. I know, but it was Brittany's first recital. Couldn't we have spent a little more? I said no. And that's that? You're always relying on me. Why don't you figure something out yourself for once? My salary was already stretched thin between paying off loans, covering our daily expenses, and Brittany's extracurricular activities. But I had still managed to scrape together enough money, after asking for favors from several people, to get the dress. I had even discussed the hairstyle with Brittany beforehand, and she had agreed to it. But when she saw the other girls in their outfits, she felt insecure and upset. Yet in front of others, she put on a smile, pretending we were the perfect family. Then, as soon as it was just the three of us, she would lash out at me, hurling insults. Her behavior was eerily similar to Brandon's. After that recital, Brittany, who had once been so sweet, started to look down on me more and more. And whenever she blamed me, Brandon would always side with her. I was being blamed by both of them at the same time, and I felt my confidence shrinking day by day. Honestly, I should have reached out to someone for help at that point, but with the daily grind of household chores and work, I barely had any energy left to even think about doing that. On top of that, they kept saying things like, "How can you not understand something so simple? You're just not normal." So I started convincing myself that I was the problem, their family, so it's okay for them to be a bit selfish. It's my fault for not trying hard enough. Thinking that way was the only way I could keep myself going. But then, it suddenly happened. I will never forget that moment. It was the year Brittany started middle school. I'm exhausted. There's no place like home. That day, we had just returned from visiting my parents-in-law. "Hey, get me some coffee. I want meatloaf for dinner." Okay. I'll get it ready right away." Even though it was just a day trip, we got home much later than expected, and I rushed to start on the household chores. In the middle of that, I was confirming the plans for the next day with Brandon. Mom said she needs us there by 11 a.m. tomorrow, so we should leave around 9 a.m., right? Actually, I've been thinking, do we really need to keep going to your parents' house? What? Why? Well, you're my wife, right? So we only need to visit my dad and mom, don't we? Plus, I'm tired and just want to relax at home tomorrow. Brittany, don't you feel the same way? Yeah, I don't really want to see Grandma and Grandpa either. But if we don't go, I won't get any allowance. Oh, right. Well, then why don't we just have them send it to you? Dad, that's a great idea. I'd prefer that. All right then, it's settled. Allison, make sure to call and let them know. They don't want to go because they're tired, and they want to just get their allowance sent over. What are they even saying right now? My mind was spinning with all kinds of emotions. Visiting my parents' home was my one and only source of joy. So this time, I gathered all my courage and spoke up against them. You can't seriously think that's okay. If you're both so tired, then I'll just go by myself. You two can take it easy tomorrow. Though I was frustrated, I tried my best to say it in a calm and gentle tone. I thought that way, things would stay peaceful. But hearing this, Brandon's face twisted in anger as he shot back. What? If you go alone, who's going to make food for us? Why don't you just order delivery? If you don't like that idea, I can make tomorrow's meals in advance, and you can just heat them up. For 12 years since Brittany was born, Brandon had insisted we couldn't use takeout or delivery because of the mortgage payments, so I had silently cooked for the family. But just this once, I wanted to make an exception. Visiting my parents' home was non-negotiable. We were supposed to be a family that trusted each other. Surely, he could grant me this one wish after 12 years, right? For some reason, I thought that at the time. But instead of a compromise, or even an argument, what I got in return was a heavy, sharp slap across my face. I was so shocked by Brandon's action, something I had never even imagined, that my mind went completely blank. Don't get cocky. Who do you think makes this life possible for you? Hurry up and do what I told you to do. The shock left me speechless. I quietly nodded and continued with the chores in silence. Wow, that looks painful. Your cheek is so red. Seeing my swollen, reddened cheek, Brittany just looked surprised and laughed. Meanwhile, Brandon sat on the couch with her, drinking and continuing to talk badly about me, as if nothing had happened. I stayed quiet, going through the motions of my chores, but my mind was fixated on one thing. the possibility of divorce. No matter how cruel the words were that he threw at me, I could endure because I felt like they still needed me. If people said I was out of touch, I convinced myself that it was just my timid nature making me different from everyone else. As long as my family could live happily, I believed it was all worth it. But physical violence, that was a line that could never be crossed. No matter the reason, it was something that should never be done, something that could never be justified. My parents and Hannah had always taught me not only that they loved me, but that I should never tolerate violence. Love cannot exist where violence is present. Violence can take a life away. No one who loves you could ever do something like that, my dad used to tell me over and over. And he always reminded me, if you ever feel like you're in danger, you need to leave and find help immediately. Awful words are one thing, but for someone to actually do this, there's no way I can ever build a warm home with him again. There was no more doubt left in my heart. From that day forward, my life changed completely. How would I save up money for a new life? Where would I move to? What about a job? There were so many questions, but strangely, none of them felt like a burden. It's sad to admit, but I had already been wishing to escape this life for some time now. I had just buried those feelings deep inside, but when the violence came, all of that was blown away. At the time, I was 42 years old, but I felt a rush of curiosity and drive, almost like a child again. Still, after nearly 20 years together with Brandon, and after giving birth to Brittany, I couldn't say that all my feelings for them were gone, especially because 2 years from then, Brittany would be going off to college. There were so many things to prepare for her: textbooks, application fees, tuition, uniforms. So I thought, if there was any way to reconcile, to make compromises for Brittany's future, I would try. But Brandon still treated me like nothing more than a convenient housekeeper, not even willing to sit down and have a conversation. And Brittany, she just echoed whatever Brandon said, never forming her own thoughts or opinions. Everything she said ended with, "Dad said." And that was the end of it. There's no point in trying anymore, is there? The little bit of attachment and sentiment I had left finally faded away. I made up my mind to seriously start preparing to leave the house. Finally, after finishing all my preparations, I called the two of them into the living room. "I need you to sign this today," I said, handing the divorce papers to Brandon. "What? Are you serious?" "Yes, I'm serious." "Mom, you really want to get divorced?" "Yes, I do." They probably never thought I would ever say something like this. They both stared at the divorce papers, then at my face, back and forth, with expressions of complete disbelief. To be honest, a small part of me still hoped, just for a second, that they would try to stop me. However, there was no way they would say anything kind to me. "What's with that smug look on your face? Just divorce talk, huh? You wouldn't be living in a nice house like this if I hadn't married you. But you're really ungrateful, aren't you? So if this mom's leaving, does it mean we're eating out today? Yay, I hope the new mom is prettier, nicer, and richer." Even though their wife and real mom was about to leave, Brandon and Brittany didn't seem to care at all. Well, I guess that's just how it is. I silently waited for the divorce papers to be signed, laughing at myself inside for expecting anything different. Brittany looked confused for a moment, but Brandon eagerly began to sign the papers. And once he'd finished signing every part, "Here, I divorced you. You should be grateful about this," he said, throwing the divorce papers at me. As I picked them up, I couldn't help but notice how unnaturally calm he was. Honestly, I had expected him to yell, "What about my dinner?" But Brandon showed no anxiety at all about life without me. It felt strange, Unnatural even. So I told him, just so you know, and proceeded to show him where we kept the toilet paper and cleaning supplies, and explained the garbage schedule. If he realized I was serious, surely Brandon would get angry. He might even become dangerous. But I was desperate to understand why he seemed so unbothered, why everything felt so wrong. Then, with a dismissive look, "That's not necessary. Housework is a woman's job. I'm not doing any of that." Brandon laughed. "But if I leave, you'll have to do it yourselves, won't you?" "What? I have to cook and do laundry?" "No way. Dad, do something." Brittany cut into the conversation, and that's when Brandon admitted to the affair. "Don't worry, Brittany. I've already found someone to take her place." "Really? That's a relief." Brittany looked relieved, while my face went pale. "So that's why you've been staying out late and coming home in the morning more often." Leaving the house had been triggered by that violent incident, but the truth was, long before then, there was no love, no bond left between us. It was only now that I finally realized that. To think I'd discover such a truth at the very end. When did it happen? Or rather, where did we go wrong? My mind was consumed with those thoughts, and the scene before me blurred as my eyes filled with tears. By the way, I'm definitely getting compensation and child support in the divorce. So pack up and get out. You're a useless person. Oh, what happened to the thank you for all the years I took care of you? Did your mouth disappear? Their smug smiles only deepened the feeling of my own misery. Holding tightly to my favorite bag, the only thing I had left, I could barely hold back the tears. And then, it happened. "Thanks for looking after Allison. I'll never forget that." What? A voice came from behind us, and everyone turned in surprise. Hannah. There stood Hannah. "What the hell are you doing in my house?" "I'm calling the cops for trespassing." "Who is she?" Without paying any attention to the confused and flustered two, Hannah walked straight toward me. Then, like a prince in a fairy tale, she gently took my hand and, "You've done so well. I'll take care of it from here," in a soft voice, whispered. Her gentle voice melted away the tension that had been gripping me. "Hannah, thank you." Before I knew it, big, heavy tears were streaming down my face. Hannah, seeing this, pulled me into a comforting embrace and gently guided me to the car parked outside. She opened a back door and helped me sit down, then closed it softly behind me. However, the window was slightly ajar, and the conversation outside could be heard clearly. "Hey, who the hell are you? Why the hell are you just walking into my house like that?" Brandon shouted angrily. But Hannah, her voice cold as ice, responded, "I had the key, so of course I came in. This is Allison's decision. I'm just here to help carry it out." "Wait, are you Hannah? I don't care if you're family. You can't just barge into my house." "Wait, is this that Hannah who never gave me any allowance? Haven't seen you in forever. And look at you, all dressed up in a suit on a Sunday. You must be broke if you're working that hard." Pathetic. Brittany seemed to be mistaken. But Brandon knew better. He could tell Hannah's suit and a car she drove were expensive. And that's exactly why he started making a scene, hoping he could find a way to squeeze some money out of her. Sure enough, Brandon began probing into Hannah's job and income, demanding she hand over a business card to verify her identity. But she didn't answer any of his questions or meet any of his demands. As Brandon's frustration grew, screw it. Get out of here. I'm done dealing with you," he spat, pushing her away. But in the very next moment, Hannah replied, "No, you're the ones who need to leave. This house has already been sold, and the sale is closing this month. You need to pack up your things and move out. That's final." Wait, what do you mean by that? Exactly what I said. And just so you know, you're getting off easy. This is far more lenient than what you actually deserve. What the hell are you talking about? You're insane. Brandon, now panicking, cursed and raged. But Hannah remained calm, speaking in a cool, measured tone. First off, this house is in Allison's name. We both know your reckless spending habits would never get a loan approved. Allison, wanting happiness for her family, paid off the loan herself. So yes, she has every right to sell it, but that doesn't give her the right to sell it out from under us. Legally, it does. And considering you lied about saving for retirement while blowing money on your affair, you have no right to criticize Allison. How the hell do you know about that? Did Allison tell you? Information like that is easy to come by if you know the right people. Frankly, with your multiple affairs, emotional abuse, and physical violence, you should have been sued and left unable to work again. But Allison didn't want that. Brandon, hearing Hannah's calm and chilling words, and realizing she knew everything, fell silent. Besides, this is my way of doing you a favor. A favor. That's right. A favor. What do you mean by all this thank you talk earlier? Curious to know what Hannah was really thinking, I instinctively leaned closer to the window to listen. Hannah must have noticed my movement. She looked over at me and smiled. I couldn't immediately grasp the meaning of that smile. Tilting my head in confusion, Allison is very capable, but she has always been unaware of the malice of others. Because of that, many people have tried to exploit her talents over the years. I've been watching over her from the shadows, helping her when necessary. Oh, so does that mean you approve of me marrying Allison? That's not the case. You, personally, have many issues. Ideally, you should have been kept away, but Allison loved you. So I decided to let her make her own choice about the future with you. Listening to Hannah's words, I realized something. Looking back, I had always been saved by her. When my classmates in elementary school tried to push their homework onto me, and when I was forced to take on multiple clubs in middle and high school, it was always Hannah who gave me advice and helped me. But really, that wasn't the whole story. I had never realized how much Hannah had done for me behind the scenes, how hard she must have worked to protect me. It was only now that I understood it fully. It took some time, but Allison has finally learned to take action to save herself from a harmful environment. This, undoubtedly, is thanks to you too. That's why, as a form of repayment, losing the house is all you're facing. There was a noticeable change in Brandon and Brittany's expressions. Their faces drained of color. I was used to it, but Hannah's voice, when she was angry, could be as cold as ice, with no hint of mercy. In fact, I had never seen anyone outside of the family who didn't shrink back when faced with that voice. Oh, and just so you know, we will be claiming the full compensation from the divorce settlement. Be ready for that. I'll send you the details later. Divorce compensation. I thought losing the house was enough of a punishment. People who engage in infidelity or violence don't get to walk away without consequences. It's only natural to file claims for such offenses. Now, if you'll excuse me. Wait, it's Allison who's at fault, isn't it? She couldn't even follow my orders. What do you mean we're losing the house? Mom, why are you being so cruel? Dad, do something. Do something. Allison, get back here. I won't allow the house to be sold. Hey, are you going to ignore me? Allison. Brandon and Brittany were in full panic, screaming and shouting. Hannah, on the other hand, sighed softly and continued in a calm tone. You brought this situation on yourselves. Other people live their own lives. You are in control of your own choices. And with every choice comes risks and responsibilities. It's time you understood that. Stop acting like you know everything. Allison, get out of the car. I will never accept this. You push your views on others too much. A family is like a community. It can't survive on one-sided demands. You have to listen to each other, find compromises, or it will fall apart. With that, Hannah got into the driver's seat and looked back at me. With her usual gentle smile, "Are you ready to go? Do you have anything else you want to say?" she asked. I nodded quietly and stared straight ahead. Seeing that, Hannah returned the nod with a relieved expression and started the engine, preparing to leave. But in the next moment, a loud noise echoed right beside us. Brandon. It was the sound of Brandon desperately banging on the car window, trying to stop me from leaving. "Allison, I'm sorry. I apologize for everything I've done. I'll stop the affair. I'll help with the housework and take care of the kids. I'll save money, seriously, I swear. Please, just come back to me. I need you. I really do." Oh, it's the same words he said when he proposed to me. 17 years ago, Brandon had said the same thing to me. And back then, I felt like I was floating on air, overwhelmed by happiness. But the truth was, it wasn't me that he needed. It was my skills. That must be why he never helped with the housework. It took me 17 years to realize something so simple. How pathetic. Even as I watched Brandon outside the window, pleading desperately, my heart remained unmoved. "Dad, what's going to happen to us now?" "Hey, Dad, shut up. I don't care what happens to you. Deal with it yourself." "What, Dad?" Brittany, who had been spoiled until now, stood frozen in shock at her dad's sudden outburst. Even so, she didn't try to stop me. Perhaps it was partly because of her personality, but Brittany had been completely influenced by Brandon's way of life. I took a deep breath, and through the small crack in the window, "I can't do this anymore. Goodbye," I answered clearly. At that moment, I heard Hannah chuckle softly. To me, it sounded like she was saying, "You're okay now," and that made me feel incredibly strong. Hannah closed the window in silence and drove away. Brandon, screaming something, desperately chased a car, and Brittany stood there, pale-faced, as their figures grew smaller and smaller. I whispered one more goodbye in my heart, but I think it was to the person I used to be. 10 years have passed since then. Right after that, I got a job at a company overseas, and I've been living in that country ever since. In my senior year of college, the company I didn't choose, A Corp, had overseas assignments. I wanted to take on that challenge, but at the time, I didn't have the courage or confidence. On top of that, I made a crucial life decision and let someone else make it for me. Looking back now, I regret how irresponsible that was. However, Hannah says that it's all part of life experience. Hannah is truly caring and so kind to me. I don't know what happened to Brandon or Brittany after that. The divorce settlement payments, which had been paid regularly, ended a year ago, and there's nothing connecting us anymore. To be honest, I can't even remember their faces, but maybe that's for the best, because now, next to me, is the person I want to spend the rest of my life with. "Allison, are you tired? Are you okay?" "I'm fine. It's just that I feel really happy." "What? Out of nowhere? You're embarrassing me." His name is Justin. He used to work at Company B, where I was employed as well. About 6 years ago, we happened to meet again at a work party. We ended up working together once after that, but it was only that one time. Still, I couldn't forget him. For the first time in my life, I sent him a text asking, "Would you like to have dinner with me?" Looking back, I always realized that I was passive when it came to love. I always ended up dating people who said they liked me or needed me. So every time I was dumped, it felt like I was being told I was no longer wanted, and it hurt deeply. But he was different. My feelings for him weren't passive or dependent. They came from a place of respect, admiration, and shared values that made me feel secure. Around him, I didn't need to pretend to be anyone else. With him, I decided to move forward as a family, together. My family was incredibly happy for me when I made that decision. As for why Hannah took care of me so much, to be honest, I was never told the exact reason. But once, after I moved overseas, she did say something. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be who I am today. You've always been my light. This is my way of repaying you. She said it like it was a joke in the end, but I was so happy to hear that I meant something special to her. I still keep in touch with Hannah regularly, but I don't think she'll ever ask, "Has anything changed?" again, because now I'm acting on my own will, standing beside the person I chose. No one told me to. This is the life I chose for myself. I want to live here with him. With that thought, I gently took Justin's hand. Justin, in return, squeezed my hand gently. Breaking away from an oppressive and closed-off environment is incredibly hard, but having the courage to take action is what matters. Through this experience, I felt that more strongly than ever. With Hannah's words in my heart, "You are in control of your own life." I intend to keep moving forward, looking ahead.
My name is Leah, and I'm 33 years old. A civil servant who works in a national administrative agency. Life's been a grind with a hectic schedule, but I'm doing what I've always wanted to do since my student days, so I'm pretty fulfilled. In my personal life, I've been living with my partner Huey for 5 years. We're not officially married, just a common law couple. Huey's parents often say, "It's fine now, but shouldn't you consider getting married for the future?" But we haven't taken that step yet. You see, my family is steeped in male chauvinism. They prioritize the eldest son above all. My parents, and even my grandparents on both sides, have always treated me like I'm worthless just because I'm the eldest daughter. Despite being the first child for my parents and the first grandchild on my dad's side, no one ever showed interest in me. "I have a talent show at school tomorrow, can you come?" I've asked my mom and dad countless times, only to be mocked and told, "If we had free time, we'd rather sleep." They would say, "You're really stupid if you don't understand that," and they'd just make fun of me. I remember feeling heartbroken seeing my friends' parents taking photos and videos during school events. Then, just before I started elementary school, my brother Miles was born. The joy from my parents and grandparents was overwhelming. Even my workaholic dad would rush home if mom texted, "Miles seems a bit feverish, maybe he's caught a cold." They'd both stay up all night taking care of him. So, when I started elementary school, neither of my parents even attended the orientation. They'd tell the school, "We're too busy with our son to care about our daughter." I was alone on my first day of school, watching other families take commemorative photos. Not just my parents, but my grandparents too, acted like Miles was the only grandchild that mattered. In particular, Miles' paternal grandparents, who lived with him, bought him everything he wanted and were happy to take him anywhere he wanted to go. Because of this upbringing, Miles grew up to be a selfish, arrogant person who looked down on everyone else, especially me. He'd often take my food or destroy my belongings for fun. And no one in the family would bat an eye. Once, he tore up a book I'd borrowed from a friend. When I scolded him, my family said, "It's just a book. You can replace it." That's exactly right. That's why girls are so troublesome. That's right. It's best for boys to be energetic. Miles is growing up wonderfully, they'd add, praising him without a hint of criticism. Miles would just smirk, showing no signs of remorse. This cycle had been ongoing since Miles was born. I grew up without feeling any warmth or love from anyone in my family. I had just one wish: to attend college as far away from home as possible, essentially cutting ties with my family. At home, my brother Miles was always in the way, or I'd get tasked with chores that interrupted my studies. So, I hid the books in libraries and empty classrooms after school. To cover college application fees and travel expenses for school tours and exams, I worked part-time at grocery stores. All the effort paid off. I got into a prestigious university. My parents and grandparents couldn't care less. If you want to go, go. But don't expect any help from us, they said. I saw that coming a mile away. I had already applied for every scholarship I could and planned to live in a dorm to minimize costs. Plus, I had my best friend Selena. We'd been friends since elementary school, and she and her parents knew all about my family situation. Selena's dad worked at the same company as mine, albeit in a different department. My dad's chauvinistic behavior was often a topic of discussion at his workplace. My mom and Selena's mom even went to the same school, and she told me my mom had similar domineering personalities like my dad. When Selena and I first became friends, her parents were worried. Friends with the daughter of that couple? But they warmed up to me after seeing how much Selena praised me and how I stood by her when she was being isolated by other girls in class. If it weren't for you, Leah, my school life would have been miserable. Thank you, Selena would say. But the truth is, I don't know what I would have done without her and her parents. They were the ones who kept me going. I was able to survive because of Selena, who laughed and said, "Leah, you be you." And Selena's parents, who always offered a helping hand. Without them, I might have lost my way or given up on life altogether. As for college, Selena had already decided to attend a local university. "I've got nothing to do until graduation, so let me help you, Leah," she said. She helped me with the nitty-gritty details of placement exam logistics, like booking hotels and flights. On the day I left for college, my family didn't bother to see me off. But Selena and her parents came to the airport. As we said our goodbyes, she handed me an envelope. "This is a farewell gift from all of us. You'll need stuff for dorm life, right?" Inside was $2,000. I tried to refuse, but she insisted. "Take it. We'll always be friends, but I won't be able to help you like before," she said, tears in her eyes. I never touched that money during my college years. Holding on to that envelope reminded me of Selena and her family, giving me the strength to keep going. After graduating from university, I went on to graduate school, which was my dream. I passed the civil service exam and took my first steps into the working world. Selena and I kept in touch through texts, and she even visited me during family vacations. Selena ended up working as an administrative staff member at a local hospital after graduating from college. After 8 years, I returned to my hometown for the first time in 12 years. I was invited to a wedding by a doctor who worked at the same hospital as her and was getting married. During those 12 years, my maternal grandparents had passed away, but my paternal grandparents, who lived with us, were still healthy. My brother Miles had enrolled in a prestigious middle school, considered the most challenging in our area, the same year I went to college. My parents were proud, saying things like, "Miles is just like me, so talented. We're excited for his future." Absolutely, we might even have to send him abroad for studies. But Miles, who was considered a child prodigy in elementary school, found himself among equally capable students in his new school. He was shocked when he scored average on his first exam.
This can't be the real me. I'm better than this.
Instead of putting in the effort, he blamed everyone else, teachers, classmates, the school, even timing, for his shortcomings. By the time he reached 9th grade, the school suggested he consider transferring, saying it would be less stressful for him. But both Miles and my parents too couldn't accept the reality due to their pride in Miles continued on to high school. As feared, he couldn't keep up and eventually dropped out. At that time, I was in grad school. My parents suddenly asked,
Aren't there any schools there that Miles could get into? The more prestigious, the better. Of course, a school with tradition would be ideal for Miles. Don't you know any influential professors?
I told them that was unrealistic. They accused me of being cold and heartless, but I maintained that what's impossible is impossible, and eventually, we lost contact. According to Selena, who had stayed in our hometown, my parents eventually enrolled Miles in an online high school. They made excuses like,
Our son is too exceptional for regular education.
He would only attract jealousy and make life difficult for himself. Miles graduated from the online high school, went to a local college, and got a job at a subsidiary of my dad's company through my grandfather's influence. I met Miles again when I attended Selena's wedding. I had returned to my hometown 2 days before the wedding, at Selena's request.
I have something I want to talk about,
she had said. I wasn't keen on visiting my parents, so I stayed at the hotel where the wedding was to take place. I spent some relaxing time with Selena, going to the spa and such. We were invited to dinner by Selena's parents, and it was at the hotel restaurant that I ran into Miles and my parents. They didn't recognize me at first. I guess that's understandable. When I lived at home, I was skinny and didn't have the luxury of caring about my appearance like other girls. It was only when my parents greeted Selena's parents that they realized I was their daughter.
Leah, is that you?
You're back in town?
You've changed. Are you free later? Maybe we could.
They were oddly friendly, but I wasn't in the mood.
I'm heading back right after Selena's reception, so I don't have time,
I said, and quickly left. I did make eye contact with Miles, but to be honest, I wouldn't have recognized him on the street. He had lost his youthful look and now had a face that oozed cunning. After the wedding, I returned to my condo. Soon after, I started receiving messages from my parents and Miles, who had forcibly obtained my number from Selena's parents. According to a message from Selena's father, who apologized for giving them my contact, it seemed they wanted me to attend Miles's wedding.
Miles is getting married? Yes, apparently to the younger sister of a college classmate. She's only 21 and quite beautiful. What does that have to do with me attending?
According to Selena's father, Miles had gotten his job through my grandfather's connections, but his self-esteem far exceeded his actual abilities. He also had a bad habit of looking down on people and would say things like,
No need to listen to people who've stayed in this backwater town,
making him unpopular.
That's why when he announced his wedding, almost everyone from colleagues to bosses gave excuses like, I planned to have a terrible cold that day, or my tarot card reading advised against going in the direction of the venue. Planning to have a cold, huh? I see.
My parents and Miles didn't want to be outdone by the number of attendees from the bride's side. Even though I'm not the most exciting sister or daughter, they seemed to think it was better to have me there, given that I have a graduate degree from a prestigious university and a government job. I was annoyed by their shallow thinking. Competing over the number of attendees is ridiculous. But if I kept ignoring them, they'd surely pester Selena's father, saying,
Tell our daughter to get in touch.
So, I reluctantly replied to Miles' message. He said,
"Long time no talk. You must be happy to be useful to the family for once."
I ignored his petty comment and decided to attend the wedding just to minimize the hassle. Fast forward to the wedding day, 2 months later. The bride was as beautiful as Selena's father had described, and she seemed genuinely kind and straightforward. I wondered why such a wonderful woman would marry someone like Miles. But I decided not to pry and just play my role as the groom's sister. After the wedding, Miles and his new wife left for their honeymoon. No one tried to keep me around, and I had nothing to say to my parents or grandparents. So, I briefly visited Selena's home, said my greetings, and left. Time passed without any contact until Miles suddenly reached out, inviting me to come see the cherry blossoms. It wasn't a grand event like the National Cherry Blossom Festival in Washington, D.C., but my hometown also had a botanical garden with cherry trees. It's a common seasonal event. However, I was suspicious. It turned out, the real agenda wasn't cherry blossoms, but convincing me to give up my inheritance rights. Apparently, there's a big land development plan near our family home. A major developer was planning to buy up the area to build a large condo complex. Real estate transactions were heating up around our family home. Our home was situated right in the planned development area. Our great-grandfather used to run a firewood and charcoal business there, so the property was quite large. It included not just the house, but also a sizable parking area. It seems Miles and my parents, enticed by the rising land value, want to ensure I didn't get a share of the inheritance in the future. Don't count your chickens before they hatch, they say. I never really cared about inheritance, but Huey once advised me.
Even if you don't need it, it might be good to settle things once and for all.
So, I decided to go back home. I booked the same hotel I stayed in before, and I planned to meet my family at the botanical garden. Then came the day. I arrived at the designated spot and found my Asiel, whom I'd met only once at a wedding, sitting alone on a bench. I was 3 hours early, but she was there even before me. She seemed well prepared, but her face was pale, and dark circles were evident under her eyes.
Do you remember me? I'm Leah, Miles' sister. We met at the wedding."
Upon hearing this, she stood up in surprise, but almost immediately stumbled. I quickly reached out to catch her. She was surprisingly light and frail. It was like looking at myself back in high school.
"I'm sorry, thank you,"
she said. Her name was Carolyn, if I remember correctly. Carolyn, right? If you're not feeling well, don't push yourself. Let's sit down. We sat back down, but the bench was cold, probably from the rain earlier. Upon closer inspection, Carolyn's apron and hair were damp, as if she'd been caught in the rain. "What time did you get here?" "We agreed to meet at noon, right?"
"Yes, but I was told to secure the best spot for cherry blossom viewing, so I've been sitting here all night to make sure no one else took it."
"This might be the best spot for cherry blossoms, but you didn't have to go through all this trouble."
"But if I don't do as Miles says, not just him but Trevor and Jasmine will scold me too. This is just how it always is."
Trevor and Jasmine are the names of my dad and mom. Hearing Carolyn's story, I felt a rage that made my whole body tremble. I immediately took off my coat and put it on Carolyn, then sent a message to Selena. That afternoon, while Selena and I were taking a break, she got an internal call. "I think it's probably from Leah's family. How should I respond?" I wrote down what I wanted Selena to tell my parents and Miles and handed it to her. Sure enough, within an hour, Miles and my parents rushed in.
"Hey! What do you mean, there's no reason to see you anymore?" "Exactly. We had to search all over the garden because you broke the appointment and didn't even contact us. And finally, someone told us they saw you and Selena together. And that person said you were with my wife too.
The three of them started yelling, but Selena sternly told them to keep their voices down as we were in a hospital. But their silence lasted only a moment. The next second, they turned to Selena.
Who are you? Don't butt in. If you're not family, leave.
They barked. However, Selena, who deals with various patients and their families daily as a senior administrator in the hospital, wasn't fazed.
I'm not an outsider. I helped bring your wife from the botanical garden to this hospital. Right now, Carolyn is receiving treatment and resting in her room. So, you can't see her.
Hearing this, Miles and my parents became even angrier.
Why do I need permission to see my own wife? Explain what's going on.
They were unbearably loud. Fed up, I first turned to my parents.
Keep it down. Can't you remember being told to be quiet just a minute ago? Is there something wrong with your memory?
Then to Miles, who was standing next to my parents with a red face, I said,
You dare call yourself a husband while mistreating your wife? How ironic.
Just then, Huey appeared, accompanied by 2 police officers.
All right, here we are. This is the husband and relatives of the victim I mentioned earlier.
As Huey pointed to the 3, their faces, which had been so red, suddenly tensed and turned pale.
What's going on? Why are the police here?
Victim? You mean Carolyn?
Isn't this an exaggeration? She just felt a little sick.
Stammering, Miles and my parents tried to argue back. Huey handed them his business card.
I should have mentioned earlier. I'm Leah's partner and a lawyer. From now on, I'll be representing Carolyn. Nice to meet you. Representing? My wife? What do you mean, representing? Making a woman sit alone outdoors overnight in temperatures below 41 degrees Fahrenheit just to secure a cherry blossom viewing spot is far from normal by any standard. But still, isn't it strange for a lawyer to get involved in something like this? When a client asks for representation, it's natural for a lawyer to provide it. Besides, you guys canceled Carolyn's cell phone contract over a year ago and hardly give her any money. What if something had happened while she was out there? But nothing did happen, so that's beside the point. Can't you imagine what would happen if someone went without food or water for nearly half a day?
You're not kids anymore.
But, moreover, when you told her to secure the spot, you didn't even give her time to dress properly for the outdoors. You even locked her out immediately. How is this not malicious behavior?
Huey spoke smoothly, and the 2 police officers beside him nodded with stern expressions. I chimed in.
When I met her, she was freezing and looked pale. That's why we brought her to this hospital in Selena's car right away.
Actually, I was at the botanical garden 3 hours before meeting Miles and my parents because I had plans to meet Selena. I had texted Selena that I was meeting Miles and my parents under the guise of cherry blossom viewing. She suggested, why not take a stroll in the botanical garden to calm your nerves before that? I agreed, as I was feeling a bit uneasy. Thanks to arriving much earlier, I was able to find Carolyn in poor condition. Panicked, I immediately called Selena, who was still at home. Her husband, a doctor, advised to bring her to the hospital as soon as possible and even came to pick us up as he was on his way to work. Thanks to that, Carolyn received prompt medical attention, and her body temperature and color soon returned to normal. However, based on Selena's husband's diagnosis that she was both physically and mentally weak, she was transferred to the inpatient ward. In the meantime, After hearing Carolyn's story during the ride to the hospital and between exams, I consulted with Selena and contacted Huey, who promptly came over. Huey then acted as Carolyn's attorney, consulting with the police and contacting her family.
As far as I'm concerned, your actions against my client could be considered assault. Naturally, I plan to file a complaint in that regard.
Upon hearing this, Miles' face changed color.
Assault? That's a bit much. I didn't physically harm her or anything. Assault doesn't just refer to physical injuries. Past cases have defined it as adversely affecting a person's health. Adversely affecting health? She just felt a little sick. There's no need to make a big deal out of it. Whether it's a big deal or not is for the police and prosecutors to decide.
As Huey said this, the police officers standing behind us said,
"Let's take you somewhere to hear more about this,"
and led the three of them away. After getting an earful from the police, Miles and his parents returned home only to find Carolyn's family waiting for them, looking furious. According to what Carolyn later told me, her brother had always thought of Miles as a bright and caring friend. When Miles started dating Carolyn, her brother was thrilled. But then, Miles told him that Carolyn said, "I've always hated my family. Now that I'm married, I've finally cut ties. I told them to not contact me anymore." After that, her brother was blocked on all forms of communication. He even visited their home but was turned away, being told, "She's crying and doesn't want to see you. Please leave." On the other hand, Carolyn was told by Miles,
"Your brother never liked you. He begged me to take you off his hands. I only married you out of obligation, not love."
My parents and grandparents also kept telling her,
"You're a burden. Just be grateful we're putting up with you. You're a burden. Just be grateful we're putting up with you."
Clearly, they were trying to isolate Carolyn from her family to use her for their own convenience. What a despicable bunch. But all their schemes came to light because of this incident. Carolyn's family, who rushed over after hearing the news, took turns staying with her until she recovered and was discharged from the hospital. Although the police ultimately let them off with a stern warning, in a small town like mine, social condemnation can be far worse than legal repercussions. When we took Carolyn to the hospital, the three of them showed up at the botanical garden only to find it occupied by another group, which led to a heated argument. Word spread quickly about the incident, and rumors started flying. Miles and my dad felt so humiliated they ended up quitting their jobs. As a result,
it seems that he repeatedly treated his young wife so badly that he even sent her to the hospital. Oh, I heard he went on a rampage that even the police were called. Even the husband's parents got together and took his wife mentally.
Miles and Dad quit because they couldn't stand it anymore, as these rumors spread, with some exaggeration, not just in their workplace, but also in their neighborhood. Moreover, a big land development deal fell through, causing property values to plummet. Miles and his family, who had bought up neighboring lands, ended up in massive debt. Carolyn's family then demanded a divorce, compensation, and a division of assets, pushing everyone to the brink. My grandparents lost all their assets and had to move into a care facility after the shock of being kicked out of their home. Miles and his parents, now facing a hefty divorce settlement, begged Huey, who was representing Carolyn, for help and mediation. But Huey simply responded, "You must be joking. If you try to contact Leah or me for money, we'll have to respond legally." I had changed my number while my parents and Miles were being questioned by the police, and they didn't even know my current address or workplace. So, there's no way they could contact me directly anymore. Now that I'm free from all the complications related to my family home, especially since my grandparents' inheritance is gone, I feel utterly liberated.